The Bible explicitly permits the ownership of human beings as property, including lifelong enslavement and inheritance of persons across generations. Leviticus. It regulates the conditions under which individuals may be bought, retained, and permanently bound to masters. Rather than prohibiting the institution itself, the framework is reinforced in the New Testament, where slaves are instructed to obey their masters without any call for abolition. A system that codifies human beings as property and normalizes their ownership cannot be considered morally consistent with the principles of autonomy and human dignity. Slaves are bad. Slaves are not moral. This passage establishes a legal outcome for rape that centers on financial compensation to the woman's father and mandates marriage between perpetrator and the victim. The woman herself is not treated as the primary moral subject of the violation, the one actually being violated. Instead, the offense is structured in terms of loss and restitution within a patriarchal property framework. So, to Christians, women are property. By resolving sexual violence through forced marriage and economic transaction, the text fails to recognize the autonomy and consent of the victim, just like how God is a rapist. Embedding coercion into the legal remedy itself, a system that compels a victim to remain permanently bound to her attacker cannot be considered morally consistent with the principles of individual dignity and agency. So, no free will basically contradicts free will. Samuel 15:3. Now go and strike Amalek and devote. Hello. and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and women, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So kill man, women, children, and infants. That's wow. This passage presents a direct command to carry out total annihilation of an entire population, explicitly including children and infants. The violence is not incidental to war, but mandated as absolute destruction, removing any distinction between combatants and non-combatants. By framing the killing of civilians, including those incapable of moral agency, as divinely sanctioned, the text establishes a model in which moral limits on violence can be overridden by authority. A framework that permits or commands the intentional killing of innocents cannot be reconciled with the principles of universal moral protection or human worth. Oh, the lot. We're getting into lot now. Wait, that's the same. Oh, I did that. Okay, so I'm on 4. Wait, that was. No, that was. Okay, 4. So now this is on. So Genesis 19:32 to 35. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him. That night that they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and lay with him, and he was not aware of it. So non-consensual sex. So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he was not aware of it. This passage describes repeated sexual acts carried out on an intoxicated individual who's explicitly stated to be unaware, removing the possibility of consent. Hey, what's up? I see you. What's up? How are you doing? Removing the possibility of consent. Yeah, the Bible is nasty. The The acts are premeditated, executed through intoxication, and result in pregnancy and the continuation of lineage. The narrative integrates these events directly into genealogical structure of future nations without explicit condemnation of or moral resolution within the passage itself. A text that incorporates incestuous, non-consensual acts into foundational lineage narratives without the internal ethical rejection demonstrates inconsistency in its treatment of consent, agency, and sexual ethics. It's literally taking someone's agency, taking someone's free will. This undermines any claim to a coherent or universally applicable moral framework. I have a hard time saying that word. So he was not aware is an explicit lack of consent. Premeditation is intentional exploitation. Repetition, 2 nights. Sustained action, not anomaly. Lineage outcome integrated into history and not rejected. No condemnation in text. Absence of moral correction were expected. So nowhere in the Bible does it actually correct these passages. That's pretty important to note. Let's see. I need. Where is slavery? Oh, I got slavery. Okay. I should put a number there. Yeah, I already went over that. So I'm missing one. Oh no, okay, I got 4. So now we're on 5. So now we're on human sacrifices. I would say sacrifice is murder, so I'll put that in the murder folder. It sounds so bad when I say it out loud. I think it's ironic, and like obviously contradictory, that Christians will call Vikings heathens for their sacrificial rituals when Christianity also has instances of sacrificing people. Judges 11:30 to 31 and 34 to 35. Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, if you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. When Jephthah returned to his home, who should come out to meet him but his daughter? Oh no, my daughter! I have made a vow to the Lord I cannot break. My God. Jesus Christ. Holy fuck. It's like the world's worst joke. Jesus. Genesis 22:2. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. So I guess this is like where the Salem witch trials got a lot of their like their work, right? Burning people alive. Right? I consider Christianity a cult, but that's just me. There's like the old joke or a dodge is like the difference between religion and a cult is one is that guy's dead. Like it's fucked up, but it's kind of true in a way. But I still consider this a cult, and it's just how I see it. These passages present human sacrifice as either a direct divine command, Genesis 22, or as an irreversible act resulting from a vow made to God, Judges 11. In both cases, the moral prohibition against killing one's own child is overridden by religious obligation or devotion. So, in other words, it's divine law. So, in other words, it's divine law. So, if you don't murder your children, you're going to hell. In Judges 11, the narrative proceeds without divine intervention to stop the act, right? And the fulfillment of the vow is treated as binding. So like God knew it was it. So if there's an omnipotent being, the omnipotent being knows what's going to happen before it happens, right? So their God knew that he was going to sacrifice his kid and let it happen anyways. In Judges 11 narrative, yeah, okay, binding in Genesis 22, although the sacrifice is ultimately halted, the moral focus is placed on Abraham's willingness to carry it out. Holy fuck, dude. That reminds me of like a gangster movie or something where like it's like you got to do something to get in the gang, but then like they stop you right before you're doing it, but they know that you're going to do it. Like it's so fucked. This establishes a framework in which obedience and devotion can supersede fundamental moral boundaries, including killing the of one's own child, a system that elevates obedience above basic prohibitions against harm undermines any consent ethical foundation. So, I cannot break my vow is obligation overrides morality. So, obligation to the deity overrides actual morality, right? It should go without saying that, like, killing your kid is bad. Like, it should go without saying. Child as a sacrifice object, collapse of protection for innocence. So, there is no protection for the innocence. Abraham praised for willingness. Intent is validated, not condemned. So, if the God was truly a moral, compassionate being, he wouldn't have even let him get to the point where he was about to be carried out and then stopped. Divine command structure. Morality becomes conditional on authority. Wait, I think I already did this one. So I think this would go under. Okay, so. Slavery. Yeah, so that was one. Why did it go back to 6? Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, not only when their eye is on you. All who are under the yoke of slavery should consider their masters worthy of respect. Those who have believing masters should not show them disrespect, they should serve them even better. Teach slaves to be subject to their masters in everything, not to talk back to them. Um, so this is literally like cult programming, right? Like obey your master at all costs, no matter what. New Testament explicitly instructs enslaved individuals to obey their masters fully, with sincerity and respect, framing this obedience as spiritually virtuous. These passages do not challenge or condemn the institution of slavery. Instead, they reinforce compliance within it and integrate submission into religious duty, right? So then it no longer really becomes a choice, right? It's submission. Domination. By instructing the opposed to subject rather than calling for the abolition of the system itself, the text preserves and legitimizes existing power hierarchies. A framework that moralizes. Let me turn this down a little bit. It's hard to hear myself think. By instructing the opposed to submit rather than calling for abolition of the system itself, the text preserves and legitimizes existing power hierarchies. A framework that moralizes obedience within an oppressive system without addressing the injustice of the system itself cannot be considered a consistent or universal moral authority. So like my whole like why I wanted to do this is because like I watched a video And someone, like, a lot of people say that religion is an ethical framework, but it's empirically not. Religion is a spiritual framework. It doesn't teach ethics, morals, like, because there's nothing consistent about the Bible, right? There's the only thing consistent is really the harm, essentially. So obey as you would Christ, elevate submission to sacred level. So they're literally deifying slavery. In everything is total obedience, no moral limit, no abolition or critique. System remains intact, no opposition. Doesn't this sound like a totalitarian system? Sounds like a totalitarian system to me. Spiritual reward tied to submission reinforces hierarchy internally. Discloses a major escape route people often use. That's just the Old Testament, because here the system is not corrected, it is continued and spiritually reinforced. So even in the New Testament, it is not corrected, it is actually spiritually reinforced. So people will use like a fallacy of saying that's just the Old Testament, but it's never corrected in the New Testament. So if it's not corrected in the New Testament, then the Old Testament still stands, logically. Collective punishment. Collective punishment. I just gotta make a new folder here. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the. Whoa. Holy shit. Right off the bat. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the prisoner, and all the firstborn of the livestock as well. So if you're a Christian slave in Egypt, your God's killing your kid. That's so fucked. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with a sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle and sheep and donkeys. Every living thing that moved on land perished, men and animals, and only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. So, literally like genocide. These passages depict the destruction of entire populations, and irrespective of individual responsibility. Again, so it's like children. How is a child of a slave responsible for anything? Like, they're not. Like, if you're a slave, you're definitely not responsible, right? Like, so how would a slave's kid be responsible? Including children, infants, and non-human life. Punishment is applied collectively, without distinction between those who committed wrongdoing and those incapable of moral agency. So, like, what it means by incapable of moral agency, it's talking about like for instance, in the Bible, it punishes people with Tourette's. So it doesn't matter if a person has like a cognitive illness like Tourette's. Tourette's tics are involuntary. It's not something that can be helped, like, or actually like prevented. Maybe it can be helped, but it can't just be like cured. So if someone says "God damn" as their Tourette's tic, they would be sent to hell. Like, even though it's not in their free will. Like, even though like, that's just crazy to me. So this is probably why a lot of Christians subconsciously hate disabled people. By removing the link between individual action and consequence, the text introduces a framework in which guilt and punishment are distributed across entire groups. This undermines the principle of personal moral responsibility and permits the suffering or death of innocents as a part of collective judgment. A system that justifies punishment without individual culpability cannot be reconciled with a consistent moral framework based on justice or fairness, right? There's nothing just or fair about being a slave and then having your kid killed. Like, there's no justice in that. So, all the firstborn, no differentiation of guilt. So, even if the firstborn is from a slave, it doesn't matter. Men and women, young and old, explicit inclusion of innocence. So, it doesn't even discern between like who's actually guilty and who's not. Just everyone's got to go. Total destruction events, flood conquest, indiscriminate outcome, group punishment logic, responsibility detached from action. Okay, let's move on to 8. I eventually plan to make a canvas and then kind of link all these together. Eternal punishment. What does it say? 8? Yeah, 8. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with 2 hands to go to hell, where the fire never goes out, where the worms that eat them do not die and the fire is not quenched. They will be tormented day and night, forever and ever. These passages describe punishment that is eternal, unending in duration, and without possibility of resolution. It reminds me of the prison industrial system, right? Because like the American prison industrial system has a 70% recidivism rate, which basically means that 70% of people put in prison will reoffend, and it actually enhances criminals. So there are instances of people being falsely sent to prison, and they weren't a criminal when they went in, and when they come out, they're a criminal. So prison doesn't reform, it just punishes, and just punishment alone does not reform. That's just proven by stats. This establishes a framework in which the severity of punishment is disconnected from the scale or duration of the offense, right? So again, if you have Tourette's and you say goddamn, you are forever condemned, forever, for eternity, for saying something that you had no control over. By imposing infinite suffering for finite behavior, the system violates any principle of proportional justice or fairness. A moral system that allows endless punishment without limit cannot be reconciled with coherent standards of justice, as it removes proportionality entirely. Without proportionality, you don't have ethics. Like, you do not. Eternal that's like saying that someone that steals deserves the same punishment as someone that murders someone, right? It's not proportion. It's like it's not proportionate. Like, eternal punishment equals duration, no endpoint. Fire never goes out. Permanent suffering, forever and ever. Absolute irreversibility. So even if someone learned their lesson, it doesn't matter. Like, even if someone wanted to repent, after like agonizing thousands of years or whatever in eternity, it doesn't matter. You can't repent. Like, it just doesn't matter. So there is no forgiveness. Finite life versus infinite consequence is total disproportionality. Okay, 9. Thought crime. Yes, thought crime. Okay, so thought crime like this, I think this goes into like intrusive thoughts. So like if you don't know what intrusive thoughts are, they're thoughts that aren't yours, that they kind of just pop up out of nowhere. Like, why did I think that sort of thing? Like that's why it's called intrusive thoughts, right? They're not thoughts that you really can control. Like a person with clinical depression, major depressive disorder, has self-harm thoughts, and like they're not choosing to think that. It just happens as part of their neurochemistry, their wiring. So to Christians, if you have an intrusive thought, you're going to hell. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. It's not even doing the thing, just thinking it. So you really can't control your like preferences. Like if you find a person attractive, that's not really your choice, right? You don't get to just like wake up one day and be like, oh, this person I found ugly before, but now today I just decided that they're pretty. Like that's not how it works. It's not really preference. Preference is the wrong word in my opinion, because preference implies that there's a choice behind it. You really don't have a choice behind your so-called preferences. So anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer. Whoa, what the fuck? Anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer. What if their brother or sister is a murderer? What the fuck? I hate my brother or sister because they're a murderer. You're a murderer. What the fuck? Oh my god. These passages extend moral culpability between actions into internal thoughts, equating mental states such as desire or hatred with physical acts like adultery and murder. The distinction between thought and action is collapsed, assigning moral weight to involuntary or internal cognitive processes, like I was saying. By redefining wrongdoing as something that occurs within the mind, independent of external behavior, the framework introduces a form of total internal regulation. Individuals are held accountable not only for what they do, but for what they think and feel, things that they cannot necessarily control, right? Like if someone has a PTSD or CPTSD, and like they feel extreme bursts of anger from trauma being triggered, well, they're going to hell. A system that equates thought with action and imposes moral judgment on internal mental states undermines any clear boundary of responsibility, making moral failure inevitable and constant, right? So you're upheld to perfectionist standards. Like you're upheld to like God's standards, even though God does all these awful things. It's really weird. So it's like God's allowed to be imperfect, but people are expected to be perfect. And if they're not perfect, then they're punished forever with no reprieve. In his heart equals already committed, no separation between thought and act, right? So many people think things either through their own volition or not, every day. Every day. People have thoughts that they didn't ask for that just kind of pop in their head. Well, they've committed the act just because they thought it. Like, actual brain rot. Hatred equals murder, which is an extreme equivalence. Again, so like, if you hate a predator, if you hate a child predator, according to Christianity, if your kid or if your sibling is a child predator, hating that child predator means you committed murder. So therefore, the Bible logically condones child predation, murder, all sorts of things, simply for hating the person that committed these heinous acts. Take captive every thought. Total mental control expectation. Yeah, this is like Orwell's 1984, right? You got like Big Brother constantly watching you, and you're charged with thought crimes, or it's like Minority Report basically. No escape condition. Internal states always subject to judgment. So this is 9. What is 10? Suppression of dissent. put this? What folder? Suppression of dissent. Yeah, I'm gonna have to make a new folder for that. I just title it suppression. Wait, that's not spelled right either. I've been up all day. If your very own brother, or your son or daughter, or the wife you love, entices you secretly, saying, "Let us go and worship other gods," you must not yield to them. You must certainly put them to death. Your hand must be the first in putting them to death. If a man or woman is found doing evil and contrary to my command has worshipped other gods, you must take the man or woman to your city gate and stone that person to death. Anyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall be put to death. The entire assembly must stone them. Jesus, this is literally like what you see in cults. This is literally like cult behavior, right? How dare you speak out about our glorious leader? We'll punish you until you change your mind or die. So family members targeted, no safe boundary for dissent. So like there's no safe place for dissent. There's no room for questioning anything, even if it's morally reprehensible. Your hand must be first. Forced participation in enforcement. So forced participation, what does that mean? That means you have no free will. If you're forced to do something, that negates free will. So again, that negates free will. Just another thing that negates free will. Death for belief alone. No action required. Belief is enough. Blasphemy equals execution. Speech criminalized at highest level. Oh, man. Oh, shit. Someone needs me. 1 second. I'm back. Had to help my mom. Pushing myself till I pass out. Because who knows where it is. You okay? The Bible presents a framework that regulates external behavior, slavery, violence, hierarchy. Internal cognition, thought as sin. Ultimate consequence into eternal punishment. Turn up my mic a little bit. Ultimate consequence, eternal punishment, and ideological boundaries, death for dissent. Sounds a lot like Trump's regime. Again, there's no coincidence that Trump chose Christianity for his totalitarian, open dictatorship. There's a reason why Nazis have done it, because Christianity is a great system of controlling herd-like people that can't think for themselves. They have to have a book tell them how to think, right? Let's see. Across its legal, narrative, and doctrinal layers, it includes systems that permit or enforce coercion, collective punishment, non-consensual structures, and suppression of autonomy. So again, anything that reduces your autonomy is not for the good. These elements conflict with core principles of modern ethical reasoning, such as individual responsibility, proportional justice, consent, and freedom of belief, making it incompatible as a consistent or universal moral authority without selective interpretation. Right, there is no, yeah, it's like everything that's moral in the Bible is outdone by like 12 other instances of heinous things that say and do the opposite. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering. Now go and strike Amalek. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child, and infant. These passages present scenarios in which actions that would otherwise be considered fundamentally immoral, and by today's standards, right, such as killing one's own child or annihilating entire populations, are commanded or sanctioned by divine authority, right? The determining factor for whether an action is right is not the nature of the action itself, but whether it is commanded. This collapses moral reasoning into obedience, where ethical boundaries can be overridden if authority demands it. A system in which actions become justified solely through the command lacks stable moral principles, as it allows any act, regardless of harm, to be reframed as acceptable under authority. So this is like saying that laws equate morality. So if there was a law stating you could murder, that doesn't mean it's moral. Just because like the higher command or whatever, the higher order deems it's legal, doesn't mean it's actually moral. Sacrifice your son, violation of fundamental moral boundary. Kill child and infant, harm to innocence explicitly authorized. No independent moral standard, right wrong depends on command. Obedience as highest virtue replaces ethical reasoning. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. One trespass resulted in condemnation for all people, though the disobedience of one man, the many were made sinners. So it's like saying, because this guy killed someone, we're all going to hell, guys. We're all responsible for what one fucking person did. These passages establish the concept that guilt, sin, or fallen state is inherited from prior generations rather than arising solely from individual actions. Humanity is depicted as collectively effective, morally compromised due to the actions of the ancestor. It reminds me of inheriting debt. Like there used to be debt prisons. I really don't hear people talk about that a lot recently. But there used to be like debt prisons, so you would inherit debt from your families in certain places. You would inherit debt, and you could be put in prison to work off that debt. Sometimes your entire life. So it's basically the same thing. The The framework assigns moral consequence independent of personal agency, meaning individuals are born into condition of guilt or deficiency before making any choices on their own. A system that attributes moral status based on inherited condition rather than individual action undermines the principle of personal responsibility as it imposes consequences without direct causation, right? You didn't do anything wrong, but you're going to fucking hell. Sinful at birth, guilt prior to action, one man condemnation for all, collective inheritance of fault, no agency in origin, condition imposed, not chosen. Punishment precedes behavior, reverses responsibility logic. Gender hierarchy asymmetry. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so as wives should submit to their husbands in everything. So, once you're married, you can no longer consent if you're a Christian. Um, if you're married, you're just allowed to be sexually assaulted at any waking moment or even unwaking moment. The value of a male, 50 shekels. The value of a female, 30 shekels. Holy shit. Holy shit. He shall give to the young woman's father, and he shall be his wife. Ugh. These passages establish a consistent pattern of gender asymmetry in authority, valuation, and autonomy. Women are placed in positions of submission within both social and religious structures, restricted from leadership roles, and in some cases treated with economic or transactional frameworks. The disparity in assigned roles and value reflects a system in which moral expectations and rights are not applied equally across genders. Authority is structurally male dominated, while female agency is limited or mediated through male figures. A framework that encodes unequal status and restricts autonomy based on gender cannot be reconciled within the principles of equal moral consideration or universal human dignity. The Bible contains and integrates systems that permit human ownership, structured coercion, non consensual acts, totalizing violence, collective punishment, infinite suffering, internal thought regulation, suppression of belief, authority overriding morality, inherited guilt, and gender based inequality. These elements conflict with fundamental principles of autonomy, proportional justice, consent, individual responsibility, and equality, making it incompatible as a consistent or universal moral authority without selective interpretation, aka cherry picking, which is all Christians do. All Christians do is cherry pick, right? That's an empirical fact. That's every Christian ever. Every Christian cherry picks. They selectively ignore all these parts in the Bible, even though it's a part of their corpus. So when you're choosing the corpus, you're standing by everything in the Bible. When you choose a religion, you're standing by everything in the Bible, period.
despite how it feels. I just keep chasing my dreams, cause I know I can't make them real. Get a grip on my nubs, I got control of the wheel. Now when I'm driving around, doing my day to day, they recognize who I am. They come up and they say, Nubs, I love what you doing, man. I could really relate, cause I've been an outcast since I was back in the grades. I tell them, be who you are, cause who you are makes you great. Ain't nothing better than that, you're special in your own ways. If you're working hard for your future and you really love what you doing, you gotta be working for progress, and I swear all the rest will come to you. It's Nubs.
They don't know my pain or the stuff I go through every day. I try telling them I'm on my way. Hey, hey, they don't know my pain or the stuff I go through every day. I try telling them I'm on my way.
Like,
Hey,
hey, even if I told you you couldn't feel the pain that I go through, I'm feeling down, still trying to stay hopeful, trying to keep a smile on my face so it'll flow through. Another day in life, take it right where I'm supposed to. Hard to get to know if you really ain't close to. Think I'm going local, say I'm going postal. I just talk about it when I'm anti-social. Hopefully I grow up and one day I'll be great. But I done had some regrets and I done made some mistakes, and I'm sure I'll make plenty more. But I gotta learn from today, and it's hard to try to move forward when you keep your passing away. Her life's a tough pill to swallow. It's how you react to the pain. There's too much glass in my bottle and too much ass in my tray, and that's a tough act to follow. I ain't been acting my age, I'm wise beyond my years. Amazed I don't have any grace. I left home to search my soul, just had my bros on my back. They gave my brother 10 years, now it's been 4.5. Now that's a long time not seeing someone you love, but you don't know what's on my mind, so don't be so quick to judge and just trust.
they don't know my pain or the stuff I go through every day. I try telling them I'm on my way. Hey, hey, they don't know my pain or the stuff I go through every day. I try telling them I'm on my way. Hey, hey.
Living play by play, every move I get smarter. Keeping my head above water is only getting harder. The time it takes to heal these wounds is only getting farther. But the blunts don't stop rolling, no, we
Sorry,
just
baby
keep
girl.
getting stronger. Glad the tree keep me high, cause lately I've been low. Yeah, we made it out the mud, even though we did it slow. We had to get fresh and oh so clean, now we on the go. But just because we going places don't mean them rides don't belong. Come take a walk in my shoes and see how far you get. I don't have anything to prove, but I got some goals to hit. A few lessons learned, but never a class miss. My pain is mine for a reason, and I've been taking hits. I lost 2 brothers in 5 months, and I didn't fold. I lost a couple more homies, may God rest their souls. Every day is a blessing, and only soldiers know. My pain is my pain, and I swear to God it don't get old.
They don't know my pain or the stuff I go through every day. I try to
Scott was able to manipulate her schedule and have that 9 o'clock open. I only gave you guys an hour notice, but we tried to make it work, some extra magic. So if you want to jump on this, I just send it to you. Okay, take a look at the Zoom room, and if you don't seem to have it, just text your cousin. He can send it to you. Thank you.
Crash ensued.